Hey scholars, Mr. Culp here. I am so glad that you're back with me today because today we are going to take a look at a notice and note signpost that could give us new insight into our characters' traits, reveal the origins of a conflict, reveal an aspect of the theme, or even foreshadow an event to come. We call this signpost Memory Moment, so let's get started and learn all about it. All right, friends, we're going to start a little bit differently today. We are going to read an excerpt from Lois Lowry's memoir, Looking Back. So this excerpt comes from 1943. And let's use my fancy pen. That's my favorite pen. Definitely not a stolen pen. Reading this text. So 1943. One chilly day when I was in the first grade walking home from school, taking a shortcut through an alley behind my house, I found what I thought was a very cold mouse asleep. I felt sorry for him and thought that if only I could get him home and warm, he would wake up, do cute little mousy things, and perhaps I would be allowed to keep him as a pet. I had never had a pet. My baby brother had just been born and was something of a disappointment as a playmate, so I yearned for a lovable creature who would scamper about at my heels and learn tricks. Very carefully I picked him up. At the time I had not yet read Stuart Little, so I was not an expert at mouseology. I did realize that he was rather large for a mouse, but The Rats of Nim had not yet been written, so I hadn't read that either, and didn't know that there were other, larger rodents in the same general family as mice. I carried him home, cradled in one arm, and his tail, long and bare and very stiff, stuck out. He looked vulnerable and homely, with two visible front teeth. My own were missing at the time, and as I walked, I began to think of names for him and to picture how he would come when I called. Warming him against my heavy jacket didn't wake him. Clearly my jacket sleeve wasn't warm enough. So when I entered the house through the back door into the kitchen and heard my mother busy upstairs with the baby, I carefully turned on the oven. I knew enough to set it to a low temperature so that it would warm and waken my mouse gradually. Then I laid him gently inside the oven. I guess I got busy with my paper dolls and forgot to check on him for a while. I don't remember exactly, but that would explain why it was my mother who first noticed that there was something baking. I always felt that if I only had a chance to explain and to prepare her a bit, it wouldn't have been such a surprise to her when she opened the oven that day. I felt that if she had just looked at my very innocent face, my wide-open, completely uncriminal eyes, instead of screaming at me for no reason whatsoever, the whole incident would have been handled better. I've always felt that she overreacted. Now, is this something that just happened to her recently? No, it was 1943. It's a memory. When someone shares a memory with us, what do we learn from it? They're sharing a part of themselves. And sometimes it gives us insight into who they are or why they are the way they are. So that's what we're going to talk about today with Memory Moment. When you're reading, a memory moment is the point in the book when the writer interrupts what's happening in the story to show us the main character as he or she remembers something important. It could also be a minor character that's telling a story that's going to play an important role in the story later. Now, this could happen in multiple ways. An author might simply have a character make a statement, something like, I had a chance at love once. Her name was Mildred. Even if we don't hear the story in that moment, we learn a lot about the character as he just makes that statement of lost love. The character might also tell us a story about something, maybe remembering the first time he saw her. If he tells us the story, it is a memory moment being told by the character in that moment. Now, a memory moment could also be a flashback. Now, a flashback is when the story is actually interrupted and we go back in time and read about the moment as if it is actually happening in real time. Sometimes the clue to the memory moment is very obvious. The character might say something like, in that moment, the memory came flooding back. Or, I remember the first time I met him. These oftentimes lead to a longer memory moment. They're setting up the story or the flashback. Oftentimes, Other times, not oftentimes, other times, the clue is more subtle. And even a short mention. The character might say something like, my dad liked to tell the story about the time that I thought I had a snake in my pocket. Or maybe something like, this picture always reminded me of... The key words here are versions of remember, or memory, or remind. We want to be on the alert for times when a character shares a moment from the past because it's likely to tell us something important, either about the character, the conflict, the theme, or the plot. But of course, before we can talk about what a memory moment leads to, we need to figure out what it might tell us in that moment. And so, when we find this moment in a novel, we of course want to stop and ask ourselves some simple questions, starting with, why might this memory be important? And then, of course, we got to dig deeper, as we do as scholars, and ask those literary element questions. And it might be something like, well, does this reveal something new about the character? Are we learning something about the character that's maybe make a new character trait that we didn't see before? Does this reveal something new about the conflict? Sometimes if we have a flashback or a memory moment, we might see how a conflict started or how it began. Does this reveal an aspect of the theme? If it's a flashback, like in our Lois Lowry flashback, we could say that there's definitely themes of childhood innocence and understanding the motive behind things. The mom reacted very strongly and yelled at her, and she's like, if I could have just been there to prepare her. And she says that she was kind of just being loving towards this mouse and wanting a pet. So we kind of get the motive behind her. So we're seeing a little bit about conflict, and she felt that her mom overreacted. But, you know, I as an adult think, like, if I found a rat in my stove, I would be very, very furious. But again, it's that theme of childhood innocence, and she wasn't doing anything wrong. She was trying to be helpful. And the last thing we might ask is this foreshadowing an event to come? A lot of times when we see a flashback or a character is mentioned about, oh, I remember this person, 9 out of 10 times, that person's going to be in the story later. Think about every superhero movie where they think back to a villain or to a person. That person often comes back in the story. So let's just kind of recap. A memory moment is when a character remembers or tells us about an event from the past. And whenever we see that, we should stop and ask ourselves, why might this be important? And does this reveal something new about the characters, the origins of a conflict, an aspect of the theme, or is it even foreshadowing an event to come? So, now is the time for us to take notes. You can pause here or on my notes. Here you can see I have my fancy notes. I even mentioned flashback and make a reference to what it is. I'd say what memory moment is. I put some important notes that it could be just a comment, a full flashback moment, or a character telling the story. And when I see the moment, these are the 2 questions I ask. So go ahead and pause here and take notes if you need to. All right, scholars, we've come to the end of another great video. Use this signpost to help you dig deeper and read closer to the text, have great conversations, and just enjoy reading. Bye, friends.